After years of working on what would become one of the most celebrated franchises in gaming history known as Metal Gear Solid, Hideo Kojima found himself handcuffed creatively by both the series greatly associated with him and the publisher and Konami. The relationship between Kojima and Konami came to an unceremonious end that saw the final thus far numbered entry in the Metal Gear Solid franchise be released in an obvious unfinished form, while Hideo found himself unemployed. Kojima wasn't deterred, founding his own game studio and his first potential masterpiece, featuring a familiar face as the lead who would do his best to fix a broken United States. Considering the level of innovation intended by Kojima at any time, and his history with crafting classic experiences, I was like many others in being incredibly excited to see what it would feel like to move through a world inhabited by the dead while attempting to deliver a pizza in the best condition possible. Taking control of Sam Porter Bridges, the player is tasked with literally crossing the entire continental United States while delivering very important packages to various colonies holed up underground after the realms of the living and dead collided to create cataclysmic effects on the world, including the arrival of beached things or BTs. These BTs coincide with timefall, an acidic rain that deteriorates or advances the age of items and people stuck in its watery destruction. With each successful delivery comes not only Sam getting closer to helping a disheveled government looking for one last gasp of restoration, but also a rating for the player correlating with time, distance, and the package quality, similar to the rating system for Metal Gear Solid 5. With better ratings comes the increasing of relationships between Sam and the network colonies for upgrades to equipment and even some of Sam's passive abilities like better stability and carrying capacity of raw materials and packages alike. Beyond the main story and missions are side quests that can be completed by Sam and even a two-legged droid. As the story progresses, so do the challenges, usually associated with the terrain itself, that at almost any time can be accented by timefall and the arrival of BTs, able to drag Sam into a tar-like muck for an epic battle or chase sequence, depending on what the player wants to do. While a majority of the tools and mechanics aren't necessary for the completion of most missions, it does add viable options for the player and those connected to the server, providing objects and structures crafted by other players, including bridges, post boxes for quick delivery of lost cargo, and even safe houses. My initial goal of simply playing through all 14 episodes turned into a mission to unlock beneficial upgrades to certain weapons and tools, as well as discovering side relationships and stories in unexpected areas. After 45 hours on normal difficulty, my Sam had seen what this version of America offered, all the while building a relationship with the little one, responsible for saving him from more than a few BT encounters. What seems like the simplest of premises, a game rooted in fetch and delivery quests, Death Stranding is anything but simple in both its gameplay and its narrative. The early portions of Death Stranding are minuscule with its gameplay options, as the player has Sam climbing various cliffs and mountainous areas while holding down the controller's triggers to stop him from falling head over heels, especially if the player has loaded Porter's backpack to an absurd, almost cartoonish level. Sam will stumble comically with the player doing everything in their power to stop him from falling and damaging the container holding fragile cargo hundreds of times before the game's final credits. Inventory management is the biggest key to success, as the more cargo Sam has on him, the less stable he'll be. While less cargo may mean Sam lacking the right tool to cross a fast-flowing body of water, or even a fresh pair of boots to replace those worn down after many travels. Perfectly tying into the story's overall goal is the progression of gameplay mechanics and options. With each colony added to the rebuilding of the United States through the Chiral network, comes the unlocking of new weapons, both lethal and non-lethal alike. The early weapons are arguably the most enjoyable for taking on human enemies. Nomadic package abductors known as mules, such as a gun that immediately ties up adversaries when the rope shot connects with its target, and even a gun that yanks the packages right off the human enemy's back. But when it comes to BTs, normal ammo usually won't work. Thanks to Sam having a special type of DNA that actually damages BTs, Sam can infuse his blood and bodily fluids into grenades and bullets that can take down even the most ferocious tar-covered monstrosity. One battle sequence that repeats itself in various locales mixes both stereotypical third-person gunplay and BT takedowns. There is hand-to-hand combat specifically connected to taking on the mules that doesn't feel too satisfactory, no matter how well the player does. The same can be said about the stealth, as it feels like a tacked-on mechanic rather than something expertly crafted, like what's seen in the franchise Kojima is most associated with in Metal Gear Solid. But the tools and equipment additions and upgrades to Sam's inventory are the most important aspect of adding colonies to the network. During Episode 3, Sam is introduced to a plethora of options in crafting some of the aforementioned items, like bridges and safe houses, as well as even more impressive tools, like somewhat unwieldy vehicles running on batteries that need generators to keep them powered for the long haul. Those certain areas will make it impossible for the player to even use a motorcycle or truck. Sam will be gifted the ability to craft carriers he can hook behind him like a wagon, various pouches so Sam doesn't have to carry grenades on his back, and even exoskeletal add-ons that can increase Sam's maximum carrying weight and stay even more stable in snowy areas. The most exceptional aspect of item crafting is the player community itself. Players can support their fellow porters by leaving equipment and items for others to help them in their journey. Early in the game, climbing an arduous mountainside is easier thanks to a player leaving a ladder or a rope instead of repacking said items. Just like the tools available to the player is more extensive later in the game, so are the things other gamers will leave behind that can make traversal both easier and more exhilarating, like actual roads and zip lines. Players have the ability to leave likes, to thank those that went out of their way, to be friendly to people they'll never meet, and maybe even encourage someone else to pay it forward. The one tool every player has and will constantly utilize is the Bridge Baby, or BB. Sam's BB is responsible for identifying BTs when timefall occurs, and progressing the story with some of the most diminutive yet riveting presentations focusing on the hauntingly mysterious Clifford Unger. BB also must be soothed when put under great stress, like Sam falling from any height, but doing so builds a greater bond between the two that also extends BB's identification range of BTs. The plot is a test of patience that sees Kojima reach into his usual bag of extensive word usage that can be ignored as the overall story unfolds and it becomes more obvious just how much depth there is to the narrative he's crafted. The personal and professional conflictions with creating this new United States are numerous for almost every character introduced, be it Sam's almost otherworldly sister Amelie Strand, or the absurdly named Dead Man, with the latter being one of the story's most influential characters for critical information. Arguably the weakest characters are the protagonist himself, as Sam feels more like an avatar than an actual character with an arc that doesn't play out until the last couple of hours, and the self-described particle of God, Higgs Monaghan, who is obviously meant to be a caricature of video game bosses like those seen in Kojima's previous works, without the efficient amount of screen time to make him feel remarkable enough to warrant a battle of fisticuffs a la Metal Gear Solid 4. Death Stranding's technical achievements can't be denied, not only in regards to how gorgeous and awe-inspiring the various landscapes are, but also because the frame rate drops and horrendous flaws like crashes or broken missions are non-existent. Unfortunately, there are some definite issues with Death Stranding, including the aforementioned handling when it comes to vehicle usage and combat, story pacing, and a repetitive gameplay structure that can become tedious, especially when the character reaches the more mountainous areas, where crafting and leaving behind beneficial tools and items for players just isn't as accommodating. Arguably the most disappointing aspect has to be how little a threat the more grandiose BTs present. While there are a couple of mandatory boss battles, a majority of Sam's interactions with squid and lion-like BTs usually boils down to the player pushing Sam forward, while easily avoiding the slow-moving tar monsters until Porter reaches a point outside of the corrupted area. The first time encountering these beasts will leave a player stunned and fearful, but after discovering how easy they are to avoid when activated, removes that tension even in the early hours. The fast travel system leaves something to be desired as well by removing any inventory Sam currently has on him and placing it in that safe house's private locker for retrieval only from that locker. Fast travel becomes less of an option for convenience and more of an inventory management decision that usually means the player will go ahead on foot or by tire. Death Stranding is one of the most divisive experiences out there, with a gameplay loop made better by the community to offset the repetition and overall jankiness associated with Sam tripping over a small rock. The narrative takes its time by drip feeding information with the hope a player will stick around and enjoy the end result. Death Stranding in no way, shape, or form will change the very dynamic of video game presentations, but will reward those who have the patience with an experience unlike any other, where the frustrations pale in comparison to the triumphs of something as simple as delivering a package to a hologram after almost being pulled into the ground by the dead. Death Stranding is so much more than a walking simulator assumed by those only judging the game by trailer footage. Kojima's latest digital gaming presentation asks for patience both when moving throughout what's left of America and when experiencing stories both large and small. The overall gameplay issues, including mobility both on foot and while utilizing a vehicle, underwhelming boss encounters, and general repetition figuratively melt away by the game's end, as the plot unravels and the feeling of overcoming what seem to be insurmountable odds, both natural and supernatural, becomes definitive. For the patient and understanding who aren't looking for Metal Gear Solid under a different name, Death Stranding is nothing short of remarkable. For the intrigued, it is a necessity to spend at least 10 hours with the game, and make it past the first 3 episodes to discover if Death Stranding is for you. Just like a baby floating inside a manufactured womb, or housed in the esophagus in some encumbered traveler, Death Stranding is the equivalent of both being insultingly mooned by someone and given a thumbs up that soothes the soul.